Hi, my name is Dave March, and this is the Land of Confusion web show for Ricochet, show for members by members, and this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Don Tillman right here.
Yep, and we're meeting today with Clark Summers, who's a member of the goes by the his name of Postmodern Hoplite on the show, or on Ricochet. So we were just having a little chat about some stuff, but now we're going to go on the show. Clark, is there anything you want to tell us about before we get to the questions?
Thank you very much for coming up with this. I think it's a marvelous idea. Mm-hmm. I'm actually a little bit, I'm not whether impressed or surprised that you're already coming to me there. I can think of so many other more interesting members of Ricochet that I hope that I'll be seeing them participating and being part of this. So thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Well, for me, it was like you volunteered, and I'm going through the volunteers first, and then I'll start going after
the non-volunteers.
The non-volunteers. We'll start doing this solicitation, knocking on people's door. Have you heard the word of the Land of Confusion podcast? So one thing I wanted to get out of the way right away, there was at the end of last week's show, we had Rush Babe 49 on, and I asked her who she would want to see next, and that turned out to be Percival. Percival, I communicated with. Turns out he's a little shy and just didn't want to come on a show until he's seen a bit more of it. So no denigration to him. He's welcome to come on anytime. Just wanted to explain what happened there. So why don't we get to...
Yeah, he will be a good choice, and I will look forward to seeing that interview and discussion when it comes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if someone's shy, you can always, use a sock puppet up here and be off, off stage. So, I mean, we all frame rather. So, yeah, there are ways around this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why don't we start off with our first question? Much as we like CNN before a debate, we sent out our questions to our guest. Versus we don't have an opponent for you, so we're a little different at CNN. But here's our first question I had for you. Where were you born?
I was actually born in Nuremberg, Germany. I was an Army brat. My father was stationed there he was in the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. So I was born U.S. Army Hospital there in Nuremberg, what was then West Germany and is now just Germany.
Okay. Don, you have a follow-up for that?
Caught us both by surprise.
Well, we had
brought you back.
Trying to go ahead.
How did things proceed from there?
Well, my home of record at birth, because my home of record of my parents, as a U.S. citizen born abroad, so my home of record was actually Culver City, California, and so I can make the sort of dubious claim of being a native Californian by birth, at least based on home of record. But unfortunately, my parents did separate, and so my mom came back with my sister. I eventually went and lived with my dad, grew up in California, and so I think of myself as being a California native, although I have family from across the country. My siblings and I like to jokingly say that it's difficult to keep all of our various threads of our family tree without a scorecard. So those will be on sale in the lobby for those of you who want to buy them up later.
Don here is, of course, living in California these days himself.
I am, yes. It's been, I've lived here I grew up on the East Coast, Long Island specifically, and I've been here for California. I live right next to the Stanford campus. And,
I have family there in San Mateo County. An uncle who lives in Redwood City. Actually, he and my aunt owned a home in Atherton for decades before it became trendy. So yeah, I'm well familiar with the area. I grew up in Marin County myself, in San Rafael and North Bay.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Yep. It was a wonderful place to grow up.
So yeah, it's near where a certain Ricochet founder lives. So yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So my next question here is, why did you become a conservative? This kind of thing, or how did you become a conservative?
I really came to it honestly, meaning that, my father was a pretty strident Republican growing up, and growing up in a conservative Christian home, it would sort of it wouldn't be that surprising.
Mhm.
But I, like most young people, went through my rebellious stage, and in high school, for a number of years, I really tried ardently to be a Democrat. I think as much just to sort of try to irritate my father, which kind of worked for a while. Not that I really knew anything about it. It was he said he was Republican, so I decided that I was Democrat.
I've often said that it's the responsibility of every generation to piss off the previous generation.
That's the truth.
And one for the team, man. That's great.
Yeah, well, but what happened was I graduated high school and had pretty good grades and pretty good SATs, and I got accepted to the University of California, the Davis campus, but simply couldn't afford it. I mean, and this was in the days when the tuition to the University of California really was quite reasonable, but I did not have the money. I had good enough grades to get in, but not good enough grades to qualify for any kind of scholarship or financial aid. And so I ended up joining the Army simply for really rather mercenary purposes. It was try to qualify for an ROTC scholarship, do my 4 years of ROTC, and get out and get on with my life. And that was my father's counsel: is this is a way to pay for college. Do serve your country, but then get on with your life. And darned if I didn't join the Army and discover that one, I really loved it, and I was generally pretty good at it. And it was in the course of being a soldier, particularly in the mid 1980s, that it just sort of naturally took me it sort of immersed me in that worldview that just I rediscovered being a political conservative as a U.S. Army infantry officer, and really the funny thing is that about a decade later, in 1992, 93, I made another, for various reasons that I won't dwell on now. Partly because I won't dwell on them now, but there was about a 2-year period where I made once again a sincere effort to be a Democrat. I tried to ascribe and be, when there was a time when you could call yourself a conservative Democrat, well, I tried to be that, and that lasted until about mid 1993, maybe early 94, before the California Democratic Party basically threw me out and said, yeah, we don't match.
Yeah.
We're not a good fit together. No, it's not you, it's me. I'm not good enough for you. You need to. We went our separate ways, and I have been a political conservative ever since. That's probably the simplest way I can put it.
Don, any questions for him?
My own self, I never thought about it too much. When I was younger, I never thought about politics. I just, would vote for whoever seems hippest or something like that. And I'm guessing a lot of people do that. I myself was introduced to the libertarian point of view at some point. I said, "Oh, that's not very interesting." And and then I realized that libertarians have never had anybody competent running any political position whatsoever. so, so that's how I landed where I am. But I think there's a, I think there's some. I'm going to suggest there's this commonality where, at some early age we don't think about it very much, the meaning of the parties, or the point of having a position this way or that way, and instead just go for whatever seems coolest or hippest. Maybe.
I know that. Yeah, I think there's something to that. It's one reason why when I talk to my own students, and they'll be asking me questions about politics, and I teach Western Civ, I teach international relations, I teach classic Greek histories. So in these subjects, I mean, these are students who tend to be a little more interested. At least the international relations and classic students are. And I find myself thinking that, I'm perfectly content if they're not going to become voters. The fact that they can vote at the age of 18. And if they don't start voting until they're 25 or 26, because it takes them that long to really to grow into a coherent political philosophy, I'm okay with that. I know that I've never missed an election. I mean, I started voting when I was 18, and I've never missed an election. But I can also say that at every election I've participated in, I've thought about it. And I look at the candidates and say, who's the candidate that I'm voting for that I truly most want, that represents my closest point of view. I'm okay with young people not becoming voters until they've grown into a coherent political philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a really good point, I think.
Mm-hmm. For me, becoming a conservative, I grew up. My father actually was a professor of political science, taught for 25 years. He was a bit more what we would call a classical liberal, I guess. He had voted for conservative. I mean, he voted for Brian Maroney mainly because the local candidate, who then became an MP at the time, was a conservative and had been his student. So he said, "Well, I'm going to vote for this guy because I taught him everything he knows." He also liked Brian Maroney because my father had written this book called The Myth of Parliament on what had happened to the Canadian parliamentary system over the last 150 years and how it became centralized under the Prime Minister's office. And Maroney was the one guy who wanted to implement my father's reforms. But I grew up reading the books of Jerry Purnell, and I don't know if you guys know him very well, but if you read his books and like them, you will probably become a conservative.
I will add them to my reading list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has especially his short story books, because he would do these analyses of what was going on at the time. So he wrote a series of books during the Cold War, during the 80s under Reagan. So he would be doing an introductory thing, talking about something there, and then like an introductory into Vietnam, where he'd be interspersing political writings by other people who had come out of Vietnam and stuff. And he just influences you in a way at an early age, I found. So it was good. My next question was, if you were to get rid of one state in the U.S., which would it be and why?
This tough call. I really agonized about this. I think I was still framing my answer to this up to about 15 minutes before we started this podcast.
And that include the one we're currently in?
Because I've been to all 50 states, and I have found that there's something to like about every one of them. And there are people, I've met people in all of them that are really great. And so the idea of losing any of them as Americans, as part of our nation, was really hard for me. I decided that if I had to pick one, it would be Washington State. And for no other reason than any state that's foolish enough to elect Jay Inslee twice just deserve. They've got it coming.
Yeah.
Actually, if I had my way, I would still say Washington, but I would say that rather than getting rid of one state, I would reorder. I would divide Washington State along the Cascade Mountains, along with Oregon, and that the western portions of those two states would form a newly restructured Oregon. I figure Oregon's got the greater claim because it was the Oregon Territory. It existed longer than the state of Washington, so they've kind of got seniority there. And then I would take the eastern portion of those two states and constitute a new state that would become, the state of New Redlands, or maybe the state of Coolidge. We'd never get by with calling it the state of Reagan, because that would be, just way too partisan.
Now this is out of the box thinking right here.
Yeah.
But that's it's I do think, having lived, and I would say I grew up in California, I will always consider myself a California native, but I spent a good 2 decades in Washington State, and I saw the state become increasingly purple to blue to hard blue. And I know the frustration of living in, of what it feels like to live in a county that, quite frankly, my vote didn't count. We can get into a discussion of the Electoral College and representational voting and everything else. Yes, those are all valid topics. But the fact of the matter was, as a conservative in King County, you recall Rush Babe 49 talked about this, that being a conservative in a hard blue county that is so overwhelming in population that it controls the direction of the rest of the state is terribly frustrating.
Tell me about it.
Yes, yeah, that's I can appreciate that where Don, where you live in California, when my wife and I were considering, before we chose to move to North Carolina, both of us having grown up in California, we thought about returning to California, and just decided, no, can't do it. Beautiful state, a lot of happy memories, we have friends and family there still, but I would never move back there.
Any comment on that, Don? Or you're hoping that they'll cut off a piece of California and make that new part of the new state there?
Well, actually, who was it? Draper, I forget which of the family, suggested separating California into 6 individual states, which I think almost makes sense. I mean, if 1/6 of California's population turns out to be the average state population. And, but the big question is, how do you draw those lines? Because, you've got like 3 population centers, and then do you really want to divide it up like that? One whole state would be nothing but farmland. That sounds strange, right? One whole state would be
the Iowa.
And nothing but no, there's significant cities in Iowa, right? And one would be nothing but the Sierras, and it's very strange. LA would be its own state. That doesn't make any sense. So it's not at all clear how you ought to divide them up.
Yeah, to me, I think you could probably get away with cutting off one part. The way I would do it is that, sure, actually, the United States, I'm reading some of the pre-Civil War history, where the creation of new states was so evocative because it would disrupt the balance of the Senate. And you're in a similar position these days. I would say, sure, Puerto Rico gets to come in. We know it's going to bring in 2 Democrat senators, and we'll cut off that half of California and make that what was it? I can't remember the name of this. They wanted to call their part of the state, but there's like a huge portion which is just the Nevadas and all that much more desert territory. It was Jefferson or something like that. Anyways, there was just wanted to split half of California off, and then you get 2 Republican senators, 2 Democrat senators, and then you can increase the place by 2 states.
Yeah.
Maintain balance in the Senate, which is kind of sad to have to say it that way.
No, the Senate is never going to agree unless that balance, both parties have to perceive that their interest is going to be maintained. And perhaps it shouldn't be like that, but it is. So.
So the next question I had was, why did you join Ricochet?
I was always impressed by just the concept. I liked the idea. I was kind of a late adopter of various social media platforms, and I don't really participate in a lot of them. I don't do Twitter. I don't do a lot of I do Facebook and I do Ricochet, and that's about it. Besides just regular email and that. But I always liked the concept, and I think I discovered it was the podcasts that I discovered first. And after a certain period of time, I can't say as I had any real hankering to write, but I appreciated that I like this product, and I'm willing to pay for it to keep it available. And then once I joined, it was sort of like, wow, here's a ready-made community. I had tried my hand at blogging a little bit and decided that, okay, I don't have the self-discipline to do it well, no matter how impassioned. And here was a platform that brought that turnkey ready. It was just a natural fit. So I joined and have enjoyed it ever sinch.
Okay. The last question, I think I had.
I think that's a really good point about the what you call it, the ready-made crowd or something.
Turnkey operation.
Yeah.
The social environment you get plopped into. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, I think it was probably about 18 months ago that I discovered the pit, and it was like, oh, that's my guilty pleasure.
Okay, right there. I was going to ask you what you like most about Ricochet, but I'm actually curious. I've never been to the pit. It's one of those things we all hear about in the rumor on the boards and the channels, people talking about the pit. But what is the pit?
The politically incorrect thread. So it and of course there are in fact ground rules. It has to stay compliant with COC,
okay.
With Ricochet. It's but we get away with a little bit more, and of course it's understood that no thin skins and no hurt feelings. If you tangle with someone in the pit and say that, well, I think your idea is stupid, or I think you look funny, and you smell odd, whatever it is that you say. Okay, well, if you're going to get your feelings hurt, then you're not going to get any sympathy from the other members of the pit. So if you come back and says, whoa, you can't say that about me, well, be ready for about 5 or 6 other people to jump in and go, oh, yes, they can. If you don't like it, you're always free to leave. So it's probably, I would call that, perhaps the bleeding edge of Ricochet. But more importantly, because the pit is this running, I think I looked today and there was, 17,125 comments. It's this continual running commentary, and sometimes it can be about pop music. Sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 different conversations going simultaneously, embedded within each other. There's a, sometimes there's a certain measure of just, playful banter in the sense of, someone will be conducting a Rob Long bingo card, and, there's certain, Rob Longisms that, and there's certain phrases that will get used for a while, and it's, and that will go back and forth. It's wonderful. It's freewheeling. I admit that I'm a bit envious that I would say there's probably about a dozen to 24 members of the pit who in the course of I think that they have the pit up on one screen and they're working. I mean, they're at home, they're working, they're doing their job, and they've got the focus that they can have the pit going on one screen, on one monitor, and I'm sure they're doing their regular job, because they will be popping in at all hours of the day. Me, I can, if I have time to duck in for a half hour, 45 minutes, you could have missed 150 or 150 or 200 comments, and you just got to decide, where am I going to jump in on this? I usually will, I'll go to the last page and back off 2 pages, and that's where I pick up on it, knowing that, okay, I'm not gonna catch it all. Arahant, for example, he will take a break. He'll take a break from Ricochet during Lent. That's what he gives up for Lent. And when he comes back in and Easter, he will catch up on all of those comments. He has, thousands of comments, but he does. And a tip of the hat to him. I'm really impressed. But it just illustrates that there is this sub community within Ricochet that is, it's fun, it's lighthearted. Yes, sometimes feelings can get a little heated, but there's always that measure of respect.
Have you experienced the pit, Don?
I've just peeked into it. I've never participated. I figure I'm doing something wrong if I'm participating. That's stuff to do, But I'd call it just high bandwidth, freeform tomfoolery. But it's very good natured.
Well done. I'm going to steal that.
Okay.
That is a wonderful expression. I'm going to shamelessly steal that.
Please do. It's yours. Not going to use it for anything.
I will give full attribution that I got it from you.
But no, I just didn't want to. It's a bit of a time sink, I guess, and I got stuff to do.
Yeah, it is. A word of caution to anyone in Ricochet who's seeing this and dipping into the pit. Be careful. It's an incredible time waster. You'll look up and realize that, 45 minutes, an hour have gone by, and you've gone, oh, go quick, log off, get
it. So for me, I'd rather contribute to the main Ricochet posting area. So that's just me. But the rest of you guys, go nuts, have fun. I enjoy it. Keep in once in a while, see how things are going.
Well, Dave, I think it was you who said it. It might have been you, Don, but one of the two of you made the comment on one of the previous episodes here is that, timing is everything. Posting something on a Friday afternoon, no matter how well crafted, you're already facing an uphill slog. And there have been times when I have labored over an essay and posted it onto Ricochet, and then hold my breath while it gets 6, 7, 9 likes, and then it peters out. Other times I have fired off, post it, forget about it, come back the next day, and it's been raised to the main page. Yep. And I go, wow, I broke the top 10. I'm second, behind, I'm trading behind, I'm tracking behind,
Bethany's latest post
James Lilacs.
Yeah.
It's like, and you can't anticipate.
No, you can't. I think I did something that was like, once did a posting of like just 2 sentences or something, and like 20 minutes later it made it to the main page.
Yeah.
Yep.
It would be like, no, I spent like roughly 0 time composing it.
Yeah.
And apparently I have to look that one up. I have to see what that one is. But
I had one that had over 100 likes, but it was never raised to the main page. It was attacking a person who did a podcast. So they're like, you got to really like tone this thing down. It's acceptable in the members feed, but it's not acceptable on the main page. And I was like, you know what? The things I had to say to this person, I'm happy to be on the members page.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some things every once in a while I'll post something and I'll say members only.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to deal with the, coming from the members, great.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't even want to get into it outside.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's important to consider that the main page isn't so much a gold star as it is, it has a function to promote Ricochet.
Yeah.
And I would be even more selective than what we're doing now. I would, if any main, for me, any main page posting that ended up with a messy conversation afterward, I would yank that back, because because I think the real function of the main page really is to promote Ricochet and to get more members and to be roughly like advertising space in some way.
Yeah, that's
the main page. It's a tempting. It's not tempting. It's a motivator, because when I see something that I've written and it's getting, at least for a short period of time, it's being seen with other members of the conservative community whose writing I respect. Mm-hmm. That and even those who I don't necessarily agree with, that at least for that short period of time, my ideas are getting co-equal billing. So it's a real motivator, to at least to me, that I want to write well. It makes me want to be a better writer, and to sort of appreciate that we have the opportunity. Ricochet provides that. And I can't say that I'm aware of any other website that offers us that same opportunity for our work to get visibility in that venue. But just as you say, Don, that we should always be mindful that if it's on the main page, it's being seen outside the community.
Yeah.
Yep. For the things that people are seeing here, as soon as they get here, they're going to see the first things on the main page, and hopefully it's not like a giant flame war.
Well, and that's what, there was, I can't say as I've seen the kind of, about 3.5 years ago, there was a number of members who very much were squaring off, and it was
Can't imagine what was happening 3.5 years ago that would cause membership to go to such extremes.
But that, and that tends, once again, there are certain members that I for the life of me, I just find it, I go, if I could take them aside and buy them a beer and say, why do you pick this particular fight? Why do you choose this? But there are some things that I wouldn't try to say, even in this venue, with in a podcast on Zoom, that still would be, if I couldn't say it one-to-one or in a small setting where I can read their body language and everything else, I just wouldn't say it. So I choose not to get into those discussion threads. So I look at it and go, I think you're picking I think you're not representing Ricochet well, and you're not really accomplishing whatever your objective is, unless your objective is to pick a fight.
Yeah.
I've learned kind of a debate style over the years on Ricochet that a couple of years ago, I guess I adopted it, where whenever there's a debate over some topic and it gets heated, and it's heated, you should do this, no, do this, no, this. It's always this, yes versus no, left versus right thing. I always try to bring in a whole new way of looking at the issue. Not argue this versus that, because those go back and forth over and over again, but instead to bring in a view from a completely different angle or different dimension, and it's affected my thinking. And I've said, anytime there's a back and forth argument of any kind, my mind immediately goes for, what's another way we can look at this problem? What are the other effects? What are the other? What are the later effects of this issue, or how do we think about it from somebody else's point of view? And that's my own. I've just developed that over time, and it's made a difference. I think it's good.
Cool. So I just looking through a host of your groups here, Hoplite. I see you're a member of American Hoplites, which is the Victor Davis Hanson fan club.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's the Victor Davis Hanson VDH discussion group. I didn't start American Hoplite. I discovered it, kind of once again, dipped my toe into it, and then was invited to become one of the moderators. And so I said, certainly, yeah, love to, and participated in that to a certain extent. But I have to kind of confess, I think that I was asked that simply because of my Ricochet call sign. That, oh, well, American Hoplite, Postmodern Hoplite, the two must be connected. I know that I would like to see the American Hoplite group kind of evolve into a wider discussion of topics relating to civil-military relations in the country, in the U.S., and admittedly, I should be contributing more in that venue if I want to see it go that way. Dr. Hanson has, on the one hand, he continues to be every bit as brilliant and academic as I think currently engaged in public discourse in the U.S. His work was instrumental in my own doctoral work, and he and I corresponded, not in depth. I mean, he's a very busy man, but I reached out to him. He gave me some guidance. He pointed me in some good directions, and I was grateful for it. And so I have tremendous. I've literally written everything, or I've read everything of his that I can get my hands on, up to his latest, the Second World Wars. I haven't read that, but I'm familiar with his thesis, and I think it's a very good one. But I most appreciate. I'm familiar with where he grew up. My wife and I lived in Fresno County for a number of years. I was in the California Army National Guard in Reedley. So regularly drove through Selma, California. My wife worked in Dinuba. So when he talks about the Hanson family farm in the Central Valley, south of Fresno, I see it, I picture it, I know what he's talking about, and I have tremendous respect for a man who achieved what he has achieved in academia and has never lost his grounding. He exemplifies the Athenian ideal of the complete man in how he has lived his life and what he wants. And this isn't meant to be like a fanboy Gus session about VDH, but rather why I think that discussion is so worthwhile. And anyone who has ever taught the classics, and I've just begun doing it this past year, teaching these same subjects in my Western Civ class, and well, and in the class that I got to teach last year on the ancient Greek histories. And when you start teaching it, and you realize there is just so much there, and you just come to that appreciation. I would like to, I particularly now that I'm on summer break before the next semester starts, I just need to take time to put some more material out and see if we can invigorate that discussion in that particular discussion group, because there's so much there.
Yeah, I read last year a book on the first Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens, and was just so fascinating to read all these. They're doing things to count coup on each other, and they're not necessarily escalating the war. Well, I gone and symbolically burnt your stuff. Now they come over here and symbolically burn our stuff. It just goes on like that for a while.
Yeah, he is one of several. Paul Ray of Hillsdale, Dr. Paul Ray is another one who was very important to my own research. And he's another academic that and he'll occasionally submit essays for Ricochet, and he's another one who I corresponded with a little bit as part of my own research. I would love to see Dr. Hansen, if there was a way that Ricochet could draw him in and get a little, get some actual formal participation from him. His American Classicist, or the Classicist podcast, and that's a National Review product, but it would be a natural fit for Ricochet if we could get him.
Yeah, well, even if he just came in and did a Q&A with the membership.
Yeah,
something like
that'd be marvelous.
He is pretty busy. I mean, he's been doing a lot of things.
Yes.
He regularly does events at Stanford. And he's on Fox News a lot, Tucker and all. He's been on Dennis Miller's podcast a lot. He's just in a lot of places.
And he's occasionally showed up on the flagship show here too, talking about stuff.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, that's one of the nice things about having the Ricochet. Trying to remember the Peter Robinson's relationship with the Hoover Institute. That he's got that access.
Oh yeah,
uncommon knowledge.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the producer's the same.
Yeah,
true.
And the Yeti. Yeah. Closely there. Closely.
Another question for you. I just kind of came up because you mentioned your military service. Did you ever have any interesting postings or something like that? You were around for the Gulf War. Did you have any relationship with that?
Well, I was commissioned in 1983, and I retired in 2013. So I got to do a full 30 years.
Okay.
I actually ended up having about 3.5 years aggregate active duty time. So it was a comparable to kind of the citizen soldier model in the 20th century, but my career was spent in the reserve components. So I was in the National Guard and the Army Reserve for that entire 30-year period, and my active duty mobilizations included Los Angeles in 92, which people forget that was a federal mobilization for the Rodney King riots.
Oh yes.
The 40th Infantry Division had been put on alert for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and the division commander at the time actually had to prohibit, because about 80% of the division tried to volunteer to go as individual fill, because you got all these young soldiers and young officers who were afraid that we were going to miss the big show. And so the division commander came back and said, no, I'm not forwarding any of these out. I'm not sending any of these onward, because we in the 49th Armored Division in the Texas Army National Guard are next in line behind the active duty units. Now, as it turns out, the progress of the war was such that we were not necessary, thankfully, but there was a little bit of disappointment. It was interesting to me that in the course of my career, my first mobilization, the first time that I ever had I was a company commander at the time, and the first time that I had to deploy with live ammunition was on the streets of Los Angeles. The first time I had to give an operations order to my company, to my platoon leaders, was literally on the bus as we were going from the assembly area where we had gotten the live ammunition and to go into Los Angeles.
That was pretty unexpected.
I can honestly say that it was one of those times that you realized your career just isn't going to unfold the way you expect it to. So in my 30 years, I spent about 10 years in mechanized infantry, which I loved. You can tell from the low, frontal brow and the dragging fingernails, I'm Neanderthal all the way through. But I also spent about a third of my career, about 10 years in Army watercraft, believe it or not, as a logistics, as a Marine terminal operations officer. I commanded an Army watercraft battalion, and that was actually the unit that deployed in 2004. So I was at Camp Spearhead in Kuwait, which was the seaport of debarkation and embarkation for the Operation Iraqi Freedom 1 to 2. So all of the divisions that had gone in Operation Iraqi Freedom, when it was clear that they weren't going to be coming home, that every one of those units had to be deployed out and another division go in. So in 2004, in the spring of 2004, we moved 8 of 10 divisions of the active duty divisions doing this swap. And so although my battalion, my logistics task force, was headquartered in Kuwait at Camp Spearhead, my area of responsibility, I had truck units that were carrying materials forward. Now, I had a transportation company that got converted to convoy security, so they converted to gun trucks, and so we had this huge swath. And plus, I had all of the unit had all of the Army's operational watercraft. So, in 2004, I had the honor of commanding this wonderful hybrid logistics task force that included Army watercraft, and we were doing terminal operations, and I had convoy companies going forwards up into Iraq and Najaf. It was this, as I say, I had never expected when I was a young infantry officer that as a battalion commander, I'd be commanding this kind of unit. And then about the remaining third of my career, I was also cross-trained as a chemical warfare officer, Chem Bio Rad Nuke. And so I ended up commanding both chemical training units that were training first responders following 9/11, and then preparing for operation was called Noble Dragon. It was the chemical readiness portion for Afghanistan. And then I finished my career commanding a unit that was all about consequence management. It was the Army Reserve's consequence management unit, which would deploy teams of specialists, of PhDs and doctors who would provide the technical expertise in the event of a domestic nuclear event, an epidemic, a bio attack. And so we would support NORTHCOM in First Army by deploying these teams of highly trained specialists in order to provide that technical support. And I once again, so I was commanding a unit of all of these incredibly well-trained, intelligent geniuses. My sergeant major used to refer to them as being, we command a unit of 25-pound brains.
Mhm.
And my duty was basically to prepare them to integrate. How do we integrate them into all of the trigger pullers who are providing the muscle for these operations? I had a wonderful career, and in 30 years, I got to command infantry troops. I got to command Army watercraft units. I got to command Chem Bio Rad. I did such a wonderful experience, and it was all as a citizen soldier. So it really shaped my opinion, my attitudes about how we can better balance the relationship between our professional military and the broader civilian populace. That was a
Wow.
long answer to a simple question. I appreciate your patience with me.
No problem. That was just fascinating. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah, really. That's just
Mhm.
amazing. It's an amazing story.
Mhm. So I guess I don't know if you guys are aware, but we had a little breaking news in the
Oh,
last couple hours with the president of your country signing a new executive order targeting Facebook, Twitter, all these other guys. Do you guys have had any chance to think about that or want to talk about that?
um, I can't talk intelligently about that
Mm.
because I just don't know enough about it. We do have an enormous number of regulations concerning political campaigns and what they're allowed to do and how they be funded and such. And certainly we've come to the point where a lot of our media has become an extension of the Democratic Party.
Mm.
So I'm going to read up on this. I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay. I had a little chance to watch the Tim Pool video and a few other things that happened before I came on. So I understand a little bit about it. Is basically there's a whole nest of actual regulations surrounding this thing, Section 230, and Trump has the president has mainly ordered them to actually enforce them. No one has previously enforced them. So when they Trump sent out a couple of tweets last night sharing his opinions on things, the Twitter decided to put a fact check thing on it and had it go into other things. But apparently you're not allowed to fact check opinion. It's if he had the government has figured this out and something like that, but just when you're spouting off whatever you believe, that's just you're not supposed to fact check that unless if you're a platform, which Twitter is, and Facebook and all these guys are claiming to be. Now they're getting the realm of publishing, and that set off this motion. Clark, have you have any thoughts on this stuff?
I've how this has unfolded in the last 24 hours. My only thoughts are that I truly wish that the president had the capacity to focus on the important issues, and to use his influence to prioritize what's most important to the country. And I think, for whatever my opinion is worth, is I think that an executive order regarding a social media platform isn't. I don't think it's the best use of his time, even if it is justified in the bigger sense of that Twitter should have just let it go. The moment they stepped in and decided that they were going to start fact checking, they were the ones who opened this Pandora's box, and no one, I think, can anticipate where it's going to end, because the media has never done a good job of anticipating where an issue with this president is going to end. So they don't have a good track record in the last 3.5, 4 years of predicting what they would like to see happen. And I don't think their track record is going to get better now. That being said, I regret that the president is spending time focusing on this when we have more important things to attend to. That's been my impression for the last 24 hours, for whatever it's worth.
Okay. To me, thinking more and more about it, I think this has been coming for a while. And I think this was like, I think his staff has already prepared all of this in advance. I don't think this is just out of the blue from their point. I think they've been waiting for an opportunity for when the social media companies would cross the line so they could bring this executive order out. So in that sense, I don't think it's necessarily taking time away from things. I think they had prepared a contingency. The contingencies happen and they're executing it in that regard.
That might well be the case.
Another possibility is that he could have moved to Gab and dropped Twitter entirely. And all the people
Gab has his own social media problems in the sense that they started censoring.
A market cap would just plummet.
It's true. Well, we already seen that also happen to both of those companies. For me, this is not the issue that got me. It's when they started censoring doctors who had differing opinions on the internet. And that, I think, I would have made that my focus is sort of like, I don't care. I'm the president. I don't care if you do something stupid to me, but you can't go around censoring doctors on the internet.
Yeah, good. That's a really good point.
You can't censor if you're simply a platform.
Yeah.
That's therein is the section, I believe it's section 230, the appropriate regulatory guidance, at least insofar as I understand it, is if you're a platform, if you don't have editorial control of content, then you're a platform. But if you are choosing to enforce editorial content, you are no longer simply a platform, you're a content provider.
Yeah.
So
sometimes you just never get to choose exactly when to pick your fight. You just have to take the opportunity as it comes, even if it is when you have other things going on.
Well, gentlemen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I just looked at the clock and realized I do have one more event this evening that starts in just a few minutes.
Yep.
So,
and we wanted to end it at this time, but we do have a question for you. Who would you like to see us do interview next?
I have two suggestions. First suggestion, Boss Mongo.
Yep.
Second suggestion, Lois Lane.
Okay.
I don't know if I've seen her around lately, but I will definitely approach both of them and see if we can set something up over the next couple weeks.
If you can't get hold of either one of those, I will go for a third, and that is Kel Surprise.
Oh.
Is that with a K or a Q?
K.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I will. I'm going to shamelessly poach the link and post it out on my own, social media page, and invite people to bring them into Ricochet.
That'd be great.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm Dave.
Thank you very much.
That's been Clark Summers, and Dawn over there can say goodbye, and we are out. Thank you for coming.